Hello, I'm Naya. This is a bow-tard build, or a bow main bar build. Our bow is going to be our primary weapon on this particular build, and this build will be on dotsgaming.com, so if you want a written version instead of the video, I'll put a link in the description. Without further ado, here we go. So, first thing, I'm a Bosmer. I don't like to go over the race first most of the time, but I do feel like Bosmer is the best choice for this because this is a medium build. We are going to be doing a lot of dodge rolling, so having the passive that increases our penetration by 100 or 1,500 for 6 seconds, it's not a lot, but it's kind of nice and effective. It's not something that you should just shrug at because it is actually useful, and then that 10% extra movement speed will stack on top of Major Expedition, which we get from doing a dodge roll while on our bow bar via the Hasty Retreat passive. Although it's only 4 seconds, the other one is 6. There are other races, which I will go over, but for both thematic reasons and just overall, like, they're good passives. I highly suggest going with the Bosmer. It also negates a lot of sustain issues that you will have. In fact, I feel like this build has a little too much sustain sometimes, which is why I'm not wearing Bloodspawn, and I am wearing Balrog instead. Anyways, on with the build. So, let's look at our stats really quickly. I put all of them into stamina, which is kind of rare for me, because normally I get really OCD about my health, and I feel the need to put a certain amount into health, but with a few triglyphs I have managed to not do that, and I have put all of them into stamina for once in my bloody life. Weapon damage is almost 3k when we're on our bow bar, and on our two-handed bar it is considerably higher. Your crit won't be the highest on your two-handed bar though, so do keep that in mind. But on the bow bar it goes up a bit. That is one thing I do find you lack with this build, because none of the sets we're using actually gives us crit, which I do find a little bit annoying, but it still performs pretty well. And that is also why we're using crit potions instead of tripods. You can use tripods if you want. I simply find that crit, health, and stamina works a lot better than just straight tripods, because having the extra crit will also affect the amount of healing you do as well. So let's also go over the skills. So I originally built this with one thought in my head: how can I make a Nightblade that plays like a Magicka Nightblade? And, well, I did it, and I did it stupidly easy, and while the damage isn't quite as good as a Magicka Nightblade, the healing can sometimes be better. I shouldn't say sometimes. The healing can be considerably better if you're used to using Rally. I am not, so I'm not very good at it, but it is considerably better because you have access to Rally and Vigor, as well as Crushing Weapon, and Leeching Strikes. So we've got... Oh, and Draining Shots. So what is that? That's 5 different sources of healing. Jesus Christ. Okay. So, first off, we're going to look at Relentless Focus. That's, you know, we use that on a Nightblade, we use that on a Nightblade. It is our bread and butter burst skill. So we have that in our front bar, even though you'd get more damage if it's on your back bar with the two-hander. Most of the time you're going to be firing this from your front bar, just because of how easy it is to weave ranged light attacks and then use that ability. Also, trying to be like a Nightblade, I wanted a spammable that would heal us, and thus I came up with Crushing Weapon. The damage from Crushing is kind of meh. I didn't want to be too cheesy and use Snipe. You can actually use Snipe with this build. You do have to be a bit more kitey though. And I find if I'm actually dueling like a really competent player, I need to use Snipe. The Defile and the burst damage is just necessary, but crushing, the healing it does, and the resource return if you don't use it is actually really helpful. Especially like if an enemy dodges an ability, you're getting resources back, and that's really nice. Also, I find it oddly easier to use Shadow Image on a Stamblade than on a Magblade. I feel like that's because as a Stamblade, when you're running around all over the place, you will often find, like, even on Magblade, I'm constantly finding myself out of range of my shade, or by the time I get far enough away from my shade to use it, throughout the time I've been snared and I can't move fast enough, therefore it times out and I just die. That's assuming it's working. Right now, shade is a little bit bugged. It's been worse, so I'm not going to complain quite as much, but yeah, you also want to keep this up as much as you can, simply because of the fact that it inflicts minor maim. This is a very powerful debuff, and in a 1-on-1 it's essential, in 1vx it's also really helpful. The damage shade does is pretty shoddy, but it's nice nonetheless. Most of the time we're using it for the mobility though. Moving on, we have Poison Injection. Again, this is where I would typically put Crippling Grasp on my bar. So, going off of playing on a Magblade, this is where I'm putting my damage over time ability. This also has a passive execute mechanic on it, so that's kind of nice. Draining Shot. This is what I'm kind of comparing to Flame Clench or Flame Reach, except they're different. It is a ranged stun. That is what is the same. This is doing burst damage, well, quote-unquote burst damage. This is doing a burst of damage, it's not a lot, and it's doing a knockback. Like, it's actually a considerable knockback, whereas the knockback on Flame Clench is pretty pathetic. And it heals us. Flame Clench does not do that. In fact, Flame Clench, the dot is rather shoddy, and on top of that, the distance it throws people back is pretty shoddy. So I feel like Draining Shot is just all around better than that, so yeah. And then I have In-Cap on our front bar, because on a Magicka Nightblade, you would use Soul Harvest on your front bar most of the time. Sometimes you'd put Meteor or something else on there. You might be tempted to use Ballista or Toxic Barrage. For the love of God, do not do either. If you're in a duel, you can make Ballista work because there's going to be less line of sight, but Ballista can be really finicky with line of sight. Toxic Barrage is not only a little bit cheesy, but it just doesn't work very well. There are so many ways to counter it, and there are also, like, you can't cloak it for some bloody reason, but there's a lot of other things that break it, which don't make a lot of sense. It doesn't always go through dodge roll, I find. The damage over time is only good if you get the entire thing out, so unless you're zerging someone down, Toxic Barrage is pretty useless, sadly. It's a pretty cool looking skill though, I will admit that. As for other ultimate choices though, is it? Fighter's Guild, Flawless Dawnbreaker. Or, sorry, Dawnbreaker of Smiting, not Flawless. I have Flawless on a back bar sometimes to increase any of my healing done. But DBOS, Dawnbreaker of Smiting, is great as a front bar or a group tool. I will use this in groups a lot of the time, regardless of whatever build I'm using, so that we can all just throw down a Dawnbreaker, because that's a pretty usual thing for you to do in group PvP. So the other thing, back bar, I have Cloak, just like on a Magblade. I have a source of major evasion, just like I would typically do on my Magblade. Some people have this skill slot with a different ability, but Shuffle is essential if you're playing in medium armor, so there we go. And we have Snare Removal, which just instantly makes this better than a Magblade. It's almost not even a question. rally. It takes a little bit of practice to get used to it, but it's honestly a more reliable heal than Rip Healing Ward. I'm just gonna say that. Vigor. Can we get Magicka Vigor, please? At this point, I feel like we really just need it. And then we have Leeching Strikes. This is a pretty helpful tool. I find that with the current... not current meta, the current build that we're using, you don't actually need this ability as much, unless you're being really pressured in a 1v1 or 1vx. I mostly use this ability for the healing. The fact that it gives me stamina is just an added bonus. So bear that in mind. And then as a defensive ultimate, like we would have Resto ult on a Nightblade, I have Temporal Guard. I don't actually use this that often. I have a few times used it and then used Shade, stuff like that. But I do like the fact that it gives you minor protection. So that's part of why I have it. Now, one of the reasons I'm using Balrog is not just to squeeze out some extra damage, but because when you're using Temporal Guard with Balrog, that's a defensive ultimate, so you're getting stats back, and you're using it in typically a mode of defense, and then you're getting a shit ton of damage buffs. So just like with Resto ult, that turns a typically defensive ultimate into an ultimate that gives you the ability to be really offensive. And also, it lets you heal better, because more weapon damage. So now that we've gone over the skills, we go over the sets really quickly. I already mentioned we're wearing Balrog. I have Tri-Stat enchantments on the head, and then we go to Shackle Breaker. I'm using a Tri-Stat on the chest, as well as the legs. If you feel the need to put Tri-Stats anywhere else, you're welcome to, but I do not, and I feel like that's a bit of a waste of money, because you can just kind of mix and match other glyphs until you have what you need. But yeah, I just put the rest to be stamina. This helps me get like just the right amount of health, and I have about 14k Magicka, a little bit above. A good Stanblade will typically have more than 11k Magicka if you're worth a damn and you're not just a min-maxing ganker, and even then you should have some to get away. One of the reasons I really like using Shackle Breaker is not actually the maximum Magicka that it offers, it's the Magicka recovery. The maximum Magicka I can get via just Tri-Stats, but the Magicka recovery is something that you don't get from anything else. So that's why I've gone with that. Everything is in pen. You're not gonna not want to wear in pen unless you're using Impregnable, which I do not use unless I am in the battleground. And then we have Bone Pirate as well with one piece protective. That is very important. That stops us from getting one shot a lot of the time. I feel like protective is almost 100% necessary on any build that is not a heavy armor build. I experimented with Swift. I did not like it at all, so not using that. And then we have a bow and damage, or not a damage, and a greatsword. So I actually have a poison enchantment on this bow, and I have a berserker enchantment on this one. You can mix and match the enchantments as you wish. The thing about this is that we are not going to be proccing this that often, so theoretically you could put that here and then put an Oblivion damage on this, or vice versa. It's up to you. The enchantments are very much so up to you, although stamina return enchantments are also a option if you're not playing a Bossmer, because if you're playing any other race without a sustain passive, you might be running out of stamina. So that is always an option. Feel free to use it. Onto CP. So in the tower, I have 52 into Warlord, 14 into Sprinter. I kind of just put some extra points into Sprinter just for shits and giggles. Arcanist, I tend to put some in here because why the fuck not? We do need our off resource. So rather than just having max stat, I'll put a bit of recovery because I have extra points, so fuck it, whatever. 45 into tenacity just doesn't seem that appealing to me because I want to avoid doing heavy attacks, and I do want that sweet wind running passive, so I put 45 into Arcanist, and then 75 into Mooncalf for that 14% extra stam recovery. And then we're going into the Shadow, and we have 11 in Befoul, so we only have one source of Befoul if we're not using Snipe, and that is the goal of this build, is to not use Snipe. Part of why I call it the Arcane Archer is because using Crushing is a very magical looking effect. You know, a lot of our effects are very magic looking. It's all very magically. So that's why I call it the Arcane Archer. Thus, it doesn't seem right to use Snipe. However, using our offensive ultimate, being in cap, has a Defile, so a little bit of extra Befoul helps keep your enemy from recovering, because after you use an in cap, you typically want to move in for the kill because of the damage buff you get afterwards. So this will help prevent your enemy from recovering. I put 52 into Tumbling because we're going to be dodging a lot. That's just given with any stam build. And then I put 21 into Shadow Ward. I have none here. You can put up to 19 in Blessed if you really feel like you have to, but it's not worth it. I'm telling you that right now. 66 into Master at Arms. This is kind of just my magic number. I haven't changed it in a while, and I don't have much of a reason to change it. You can get like 1% extra more damage, but I feel like that's useful in other places as well. And then I put 9 into Physical Weapon Expert for that extra damage on your light attacks, because that shit adds up over time. I put a lot into Thaumaturge, and we don't really have to, but I do feel like after that 50% mark, where Poison Injection gets really potent, Thaumaturge kind of helps that. So after you get them under that 50% mark, this really helps bring them down. 30 into Piercing, because we don't have a lot of pen, so this is helpful. And 21, or I'm reading the percentage, 61 in Precise Strikes. You could make this 66. I have considered doing that, actually, and taking stuff out of Thaumaturge and putting it into Precise Strikes. And then we have a nice 56 into Mighty. This is just our base damage, physical, poison, disease damage done. No damage over time, no instant attack, just flat damage. Moving on into our defensive CP. In the Steed, we have 66 into Ironclad. That helps to prevent us from getting bursted down, which is why I typically put more into Ironclad than I do Thick-Skinned. So I have 66 here, and Thick-Skinned I only have 56, I think. We'll check. In Resistance, for our crit resistance, I have 51, because we're a stam build. I feel like we need a little bit more, because on Magicka builds, I only do about 40, 44, and this one I have 51. It's not a huge difference, but you can notice it sometimes. So yeah, in Thick-Skinned, I only have 56. While dot pressure can be annoying, and it is, you know, a problem, what is going to kill you most of the time is burst damage, which is why I have put 66 into Ironclad and just put 56 in here. And then I have 43 into Elemental Defender and 43 into Hardy. The next level down is 37, if I remember correctly. So you can do that, get some extra points, and then put that here if you really feel the need for more healing, or you can put that in your crit resistance if you feel it be necessary, but I do not. And then I put 11 into Quick Recovery, simply because 11 is actually the jump point, but you really only want to put 10 in here because this is a nice passive. I like this for PvE and PvP, literally anything. If you're resurrecting a player, just having this passive is really fucking nice. While you're rezzing another player, your damage taken is reduced by 15%. That's a lot. It's not a shit ton, but that's a lot. So that's why we do this. Even when we're not playing in a group, sometimes it's just nice. So I have gone over gear. I have gone over skills. Vampire, yes. A lot of people may feel the need to use Vampire because this is, you know, a stam build that has a bow, but not really ganking. I do have my own personal gank build, but it really just changes some of the skills around, so it's not that impressive. But, you know, this is pretty slow, so I understand why people might want to have vampire speed, but honestly, it's not necessary. Just dodge roll, get your speed buff, sprint up to your enemy, cloak if you feel the need to not be seen. You should have enough magicka recovery to not be seen. Also max magicka. It is not necessary, and I only feel like you need vampire if you're going to be using mist form, and since we're a stand build, we definitely don't need mist form. I have put on werewolf just for shits and giggles. I have not seen the need I've not seen a reason to really use it. I've also been leveling it for the achievement. It's fun, you can play around with it a bit. It's nice to have that extra stam recovery while it's on your back bar, but I like it makes you have a lot of stam recovery. Like, that is a fuck ton of stam recovery. That is an excessive amount of stam recovery. But yeah, no, I do not see the reason to have that there most of the time, since you already have enough sustain. I've also used this. I typically put that here though, so if you want that extra like sprint cost reduction, you can put that there, but I feel like that's unnecessary, and should you need the extra sustain, deep thoughts can also be placed there as well. That covers all of it. As for passives, you're going to want basically anything that relates to combat, as I always say. Buff food. You're going to want Dubious Camoran Throne. I seldom see a reason to use Tri-Stat or Die-Stat, is that what they call it? Blue food. It's Witch Mothers and Dubious all the way. You can use Artanium Takeaway Broth if you have that, or if you want to spend the money on that. I don't care about that really. As for Amundus, you're going to want the Warrior, that extra weapon damage. As for the other races, I did say I'd touch upon this. Dunmer is probably going to be your best option if you just want straight damage with a side of utility. You can, of course, go Orc if you want. You'll get some extra mobility, and you might get better damage than Dunmer. But quite frankly, the extra magicka that Dunmer has is pretty useful. So don't discount Dunmer. Khajiit, it's got good crit damage, it's got good healing. The recovery passive allows you to maybe not use Shackle Breaker. I would still use Shackle Breaker. It would let you cloak more though. But I wouldn't crouch on that entirely. Though if you do want to maximize your ability to use cloak, because of the Undaunted passive, we're going to want to have 5-1-1 on. So I have my light shoulders here. You're going to have one piece light armor, right? So all of these give you stats for having one piece of light armor equipped. These two require 5 pieces or more equipped. So we're just going to go with these 3. This is cost reduction. Reduces the cost of sprint by 3% just for wearing 1, which is really nice as a stand build. Reduces the effectiveness of snares applied to you by 4% because I'm wearing 1, and snares suck. This is an increase of magicka recovery and a 2% decrease of cost, which is also always appreciated. And this just gives me a minuscule amount of spell resistance. This isn't even, like, this is 0.2, 0.3, 0.1 spell damage mitigation. It's not a lot, but it all adds up. Same thing with heavy armor, although you don't need these two down here, but you might want Juggernaut, which increases your health by 2%, which is really, really nice. Constitution, this is a nice little extra, but it's not necessary. And then Resolve, this is just like the same as the light armor one, but it applies to spell and physical resistance, whereas that one just applied to spell resistance. Moving on to Imperial, however, I know people are going to look at me weird And they're gonna be like, why are you suggesting Imperial instead of Orc? Well, one, Orcs are fucking ugly. That is a personal problem of mine. I am aware of that, but Orcs are pretty ugly. Despite how powerful they are, I can't deal with the tusks. So, my suggestion would be Imperial, because of the max stats you get does help your damage and your survivability, and you're gonna get some nice healing from the red diamond passive, because, you know, rushing is a direct damage and light attack is direct damage, so you're just gonna be getting some extra healing and sustain. It's some pretty good extra sustain, because it's 3% of all skills, which I think includes your dodge rolling. I'm not sure about that, but if it's the same way Alteration Mastery is, it will decrease the cost of your dodge rolling as well as your ultimates. So 3% across the board is pretty damn good. So, as a quick, just, you know, guide to how to play it, as for any stand build, you want to keep Rally up. This is also our source of major brutality, because I'm not using PvE potions for once in my life. Would you look at that? So that's going to be needed kept up for reasons other than just, you know, this is our source of burst heal. Always try and combo your stuns with the Relentless. Always reapply Leeching Strikes, even though I don't have it on my bar right now. Because even if we're just walking around, we're going to be getting 4k resources back after 20 seconds. So if we're sprinting around and we're sprinting for straight 20 seconds, don't do that. You're gonna get 4k stamina back, even if you're just sprinting right now. So think of it as a little bit of an investment for the future. Keep Shade up as often as you can, if not for the ability to move and get around instantly, then for the main, because the main is something that you will notice when you don't have. If you can definitely notice, you know, why am I taking so much damage? Just because your target isn't maimed. So yeah, and it's kind of easier to use on this build than on a Nightblade, just because you can dodge closer to it. Sustain is pretty easy. We don't always need leeching, but you're gonna want this for the healing. And if you get in a bind, having the sustain will be really, really nice. For any of the newer players, because since this is a archer build, I know there are going to be newer players who look at this. Spamming Vigor does not help. It is a healing over time ability. It does not help. If you're going to spam something, spam Vigor. That's not going to help you a lot either, but it'll do more than spamming spamming Vigor. Spamming Rally, not Vigor, will help you more, but overall, just don't do that. Yeah, drink potions on cooldown too. I know you guys may not have a lot of money, but due to the Nightblade passive in Siphoning Catalyst, you get 20 ultimate every time you drink a potion. So I'm at 20 ultimate right now. If I drink another potion, I'm at 40 now. So if you're struggling to get ultimate and you're, you know, just at that point where you need your ultimate and you have a potion available, pop that potion, use an ultimate, boom, dead, done. Drop the bad guy. And that's it. So that would be the Arcane Archer for my little experiment that actually turned out to not be shit. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your support and your attention, because I know this can go on for a while. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know on my Twitch, in the comments below, in the Dots Gaming Discord, in the ESO fam Discord, in my Discord, my Twitter. Literally, just you can send me a message in game and I will probably answer your question. I am here as a resource and as an educator, so I really don't care what you ask me, just don't be stupid. Remember, there are no stupid questions, only stupid people. Love you all, stay safe, and good night.